statement. And I now give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Mr. President. We are grateful to the Special Envoy of the Secretary General, Martin Griffiths, for the detailed report about the recent round of intra-Yemeni consultations held in Sweden, as well as the Undersecretary General, Mark Lowcock, for his overview of the humanitarian situation in the Republic of Yemen. We thank the government of Sweden for its assistance in preparations for and the conduct of these important negotiations, and we welcome the new permanent representative of the Republic of Yemen to the United Nations. Like many other members of the Security Council, we should like to believe that in the light of the agreements arrived at in Stockholm, a new stage has been ushered in of settlement to the Yemeni conflict. We trust that further concerted efforts will enable us to achieve a full ceasefire in the country and to help millions of Yemenis who are in dire need of some form of assistance. These people are starving. They lack access to the necessary medical treatment and medicines. The briefing delivered by Mark Lowcock paints an accurate picture of the scale of the humanitarian crisis plaguing Yemen, which is the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. The Rubicon that we have neared as a result of the process launched in Yemen now needs to be crossed. To that end, it is necessary to continue to implement the agreements arrived at during the first round of intra-Yemeni consultations. It is incumbent upon us all to lend assistance to the special envoy. We believe that the top priority is facilitating implementation of the ceasefire agreement and the withdrawal of troops from Hodeida port and city. Successes along these lines are important not only to make headway in the de-escalation process throughout the country, but also to ensure that there be sustained deliveries of humanitarian and commercial cargo to the northern parts of Yemen, northern parts where the majority of the country's population resides. It is important to lend the greatest possible assistance in the establishment of the Bilateral Coordination Committee with UN participation, and this committee is to monitor the disengagement of forces in Hodeida. We regard this part of the package of agreements on Yemen as of critical importance for Mr. Griffith's further mediation efforts, including in the context of the organization of the next round of talks early next year. We welcome other achievements arrived at with assistance of Mr. Griffiths. These are important mutual understandings that help to elevate the parties to the conflict to a new level of dialogue and trust. The same applies to the agreement on the exchange of thousands of prisoners of war, which will be delivered upon before the end of January 2019, this under the oversight of the ICRC, and the parameters for the resumption of oil and gas export. We note the exemplary professionalism of the Special Envoy, as well as a personal contribution of the United Nations Secretary General to the successful completion of talks in Stockholm. The Russian Federation has also made its contribution in facilitating progress in the intra-Yemeni negotiations. We have done so in our national capacity as a permanent member of the Security Council and as a member of the G20, of the group of 19, rather. We believe that support for the efforts of Martin Griffiths in Sweden by representatives of the international community was nearly ideal. We attribute particular importance to the fact that the cohesive efforts of the 5 permanent members of the Security Council helped the Special Envoy at a most critical moment. We believe that this effective format of assistance should be made a permanent reality. What remains still unresolved are equally important issues, specifically those pertaining to the airport in Sana'a and economic issues, where the Yemenis are to reach agreement during subsequent negotiations rounds. Certainly, prospects in their resolution will largely hinge upon maintaining the political will of belligerents in the implementation of agreements that have already been reached. Our shared goal is to keep the political process afloat so that political dialogue will set the tone for developments of the situation on the ground rather than the opposite. That is the only way we will be able to make progress towards ending the brutal war, a war that has dealt a devastating blow to the Yemeni economy and population. It is within our capacity to remedy the situation. It is important to act in a concerted way. We would call for further concerted efforts in support of the efforts of the United Nations in Yemen. There can be no military solution to the conflict in Yemen. The sole priority needs to be addressing the interests of the Yemeni people. The Russian Federation stands ready to engage in cooperation to settle the conflict in Yemen, as well as for the advancement of peace and stability throughout the Middle East. We view the Russian blueprint for security and cooperation in the Persian Gulf and ultimately in the entire Middle East as both timely and relevant. We will continue efforts for its implementation in consultation with all interested sides. We believe that this will transform an atmosphere of threats and confrontation in the region into one of dialogue and cooperation. Thank you. I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for his statement.